It is my pleasure to welcome you to this sustainability segment and introduce you to our keynote session on plants, people, and places led by Chris Kilham. Chris Kilham is a medicine hunter, author, educator, and yogi. He's the founder of Medicine Hunter Included. Chris has conducted medicinal plant research and sustainable botanical sourcing in over 45 countries, and he works with companies to develop and popularize traditional plant-based food and medicinal products into market successes. The New York Times actually called Chris part David Attenborough and Indiana Jones. Chris, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalia. Good morning, everybody. Oh, I appreciate that. There are many dimensions to sustainability. I'm talking about sustainability in the botanical supply chain today. Some people, for example, work on soil fertility. So enhancing the nutrient density of soil to produce great yields of crops, and also to enhance active constituents in crops. Doing this organically, doing this biodynamically. There are some people who work on facility sustainability, so reducing energy use, reducing water use, reducing waste, increasing industrial efficiencies in a variety of ways. I see that there are a couple of companies here that now have a zero carbon footprint. Congratulations to them. I really focus on, as the title says, plants, people, and places. I've been working with sustainable botanical trade in one way or another since the 1980s, when I started working with grain and bean farmers who were growing organically by the thousands of acres in the American Midwest, and subsequently transitioned to medicinal plants and have been fortunate to do that around the world. The woman on the left was a 103-year-old shaman named Maria Sina that I met in 1997 when I was living with Indians on the river in the Amazon in Brazil. We were chasing shamans all over the place. And she was very hard to find. We'd show up at some place and they'd go, "Oh yeah, man, she was here, she just left." And this went on for a few days, and we finally find her. And I'd been talking about indigenous cultures for a few years before that, but she looked at me and she said, "You bridge the worlds. You have to do this." And she basically explained to me that in her estimation, there was not enough understanding between people and different cultures, and she sort of tasked me to do some of that. And so I really took that up as a cause. And since then, I've been championing the voices and the presence and the importance of the indigenous people from whom we derive our botanicals. So thank you to Maria Sina, who's pictured here with her youngest daughter, Marta, who was 72. All right, so I want to break this into basically three sections: plants, people, and places. And I want to start with two dimensions of plant acquisition, and one is cultivation. I'm using as an example here the certified organic farms of KSM 66 Ashwagandha, with whom I work, just in full disclosure. On the left you see Ashwagandha tells you when it is ready to harvest. It turns from green to yellow. In Kota, India, the certified organic farms hire about 300 local women every harvest season to harvest the 1,600 acres of ashwagandha root. And this provides very much needed jobs for women in the community, helps them to better support their families. And also, as certified organic cultivation means that we're not enhancing the toxicity of soil, water, air, or the people who work with the plants. In Vanuatu, South Pacific, where I started working with kava in 1995, kava, as you may know, Piper methysticum, is a relaxing plant. It's important to the cultures of the people throughout all of the Pacific Islands. We helped to develop it into a crop and into a natural product in the late 1990s. And there, again, they used de facto organic. And I want to make a point about this. Not everybody can afford organic certification. and not everybody has access to organic certification bodies. If you're acquiring botanicals and you insist that people in remote places be certified organic, then pay for it. Just plain pay for it. Don't put that burden on them. They don't have any money in the first place. So it's up to you. If that's a demand you make, pay for the darn thing. Kava has gone from something that has always been a traditional crop. Kava's drunk every afternoon by people in the Pacific Islands in huge quantities, to something that is now known as a relaxing and stress-relieving agent. And by the way, I want to say, I'm not trying to outline an entire program here. I'm trying to give you ideas and examples of different activities and different things that add up to sustainability in different places. In the Peruvian Andes, where I've been working with Maca since 1998, this is a root plant that is a staple food that also enhances energy and sexual function and overall endurance and stamina. It acts as an adaptogen. It's been an important crop, an important food of the people in the high Andes in the Junin Plateau at about 15,000 feet altitude for about 2,000 years. When I started working with this crop, one of the dimensions is you want to make sure that there's a mutual agreement, mutual consent, that a crop can be acquired and then used in different countries. I was fortunate my first time to show up when there was a large Maca festival. So I went around to about 80 different people at booths in this super high altitude place where you're just woozy all the time from the altitude. And I said, what would you think about if we could sell Maca in the United States, in Europe? And mostly people looked at me and said, do you think it could possibly be so? We would love that, because the important plants that people work with are something they take great pride in. If you could get these people to grow peanuts, and you couldn't because peanuts wouldn't grow up there, but if you could, they wouldn't care about that crop. But Maca is important to them, just as Kava is important to the people of the South Pacific, just as Ashwagandha is important to the people of India. They care about that. When you show respect for people's most important plants, they appreciate it greatly. In Hunan, China, there's an operation called Jinjing Tea. This is a primary supplier to Indina, among other entities. They are considered by the World Wildlife Fund to be a very significant, sustainable tea plantation. They hire a huge number of local women for the harvest. And I'd like to say that the botanical sector is one sector in which women actually get employment in remote countries. Women, as you know, typically are at less of an advantage culturally in many parts of the world. They typically earn lower wages than men do, certainly. And in this particular community in Hunan, they really do a lot to make sure that the women have good wages and therefore can support their families. This is de facto organic. Again, it qualifies for organic but not certified, but a great example of a large operation, thousands of acres of tea, done beautifully and done right. You may or may not know that the coffee supply is endangered. Now, if you didn't care about sustainability before, you're going to sit up and take notice when I tell you that your cup of coffee is in danger. It is the case that thanks to global climate change, coffee production around the world is decreasing. There are 100 million small coffee farmers who depend on coffee for a living. We're used to drinking Arabica bean coffee. It's probably the case that within 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, we'll all be drinking Stenophylla instead, because it's more heat resistant, it's more drought resistant, it's more tolerant of the terrible, terrible changes that are happening in our environment. In the case of La Florida in the Chanchamayo region of the Peruvian Andes, so on the eastern slope of the Andes going down to the major Amazon basin. About 2,500 small farmers bring their coffee to La Florida, and the chances are good that if you're drinking organic Peruvian coffee, it has come through this particular cooperative. So they do a tremendous service by aggregating the coffee from all the farmers, grading the coffee just the way it would happen anyplace else, keeping a higher price so that they get a decent wage. And it's a lovely operation. I've been there several times, and it's just wonderful to see what they're doing for these small farmers. Because remember, small farmers typically do not have the capacity to market themselves or to fight for better market advantage in international markets. So this is a great bit of advocacy. So now another side of plant acquisition is wild harvesting. Wild harvesting is a topic of much debate. How much can be wild harvested? Where? When is too much? In the case of acai, which was really championed by the company Sambazon, over 20 years ago now, acai palms grow profusely in the Amapa region of Brazil. There are millions and millions and millions of acai palms. And so it can be harvested sustainably. If you know anything about palm fruits, dates and areca and so many other palm fruits, they will ripen and then the branches will fall from the trees and will rot on the ground. So what happens is harvesters climb the trees, and you have to be super fit to climb palm trees all day long, because they're not doing it with bucket trucks or with ladders. They're just climbing these trees with a machete in their mouth, and they're cutting down the branches and bringing them down. This is completely sustainable. It can be done year after year after year without damaging the environment or without endangering the supply of acai. On the left-hand side, you see a woman stripping acai berries off of the branches and into a basket. And on the right-hand side, you see some guys standing around looking proud and sort of interesting with their baskets of acai, which will be kept out of the sun until nighttime and then transported to the night market, where there'll be 40, 50,000 baskets of acai every single night during harvest time. They'll be sold, and at the end of the day, at the end of the night, when the sun comes up, there'll just be a few berries left on the ground. So it is a sustainable harvest, and thanks to the advocacy of Sambazon and other companies, acai has become a big and profitable business for indigenous farmers. Sambazon has about 150,000 families working for them harvesting, and that means income that these people did not previously have. Just to point something out, in indigenous native communities, most people don't have a job, okay? They fish and they sell a little fish. They work for logging operations some of the time because they need to feed their families. They harvest some crops when they can. They stitch together a living. So if you can do something that boosts the fortunes of these people in a sustainable manner, it's tremendous for them and for their communities. Cat's claw, Uncaria tomentosa, is without question the single most popular and highly valued of all medicinal plants in the Amazon rainforest. I've worked in the Amazon about 35 times or so since the 90s, and I've spent a lot of time with cat's claw. It is the inner bark of a vine that grows profusely throughout Amazonia. It is the case that in some areas cat's claw has been over-harvested. It is also the case that in other areas, cat's claw is so profuse that you can harvest tons and tons of it and not endanger the supply. So here's a circumstance in which the sustainability of the harvest is variable. It may be sustainable in some areas and not in others. And this is where agronomic specialists who assess population density of plants can make a huge contribution. In Morocco, the rosemary harvest is huge. This is from the project that NatureX, who I used to work with and is now Givaudan, has with an outfit called the Schmarek family. If you look on the left-hand side, you see this guy is hand-cutting rosemary with a sickle. And if you know anything about rosemary, you don't uproot the plant. You cut the leaves and branches off. It grows back profusely. It doesn't endanger the supply at all. And all the little green dots that you see behind this man for hundreds of miles, millions and millions and millions of them are rosemary. Now, one company who monocrops rosemary and uses toxic agricultural chemicals to do so has made the claim that this practice somehow endangers the supply or damages the environment. It doesn't. This is as sustainable as it gets. It also provides some employment to women. It also provides, well, unpaid employment to donkeys as well. But a great crop. Thousands of tons of it are harvested every year in Morocco. There is a honey that is highly valued in Malaysia, and it's called Tualang honey. And it comes from the Tualang tree, which is Kompassia excelsa, and it is made by a special bee called Apis dorsata. These are large bees. They're not overly friendly. They're very, very happy to sting you. Tualang trees, when you go along, if you go along a road and you look at the forest, Tualang trees rise up way higher than the rest of the forest, so they're very easy to spot. And during the time when the bees build their hives, especially May through September, Tualang trees will be loaded with these huge hives. These collectors climb these trees without adequate safety equipment, take down hives, bring down the honey, and then it goes for sale. As you can imagine, there's a tremendous amount of honey adulteration claiming to be Tualang. In this instance, the majority of Tualang trees are so deep in the forest that you really can't get to them, so the supply will never be endangered and the bees won't be lost. But it's the harvesters who risk their lives to climb these trees and harvest them who decide what the price is. If they say Tualang honey is $40 a gallon, believe me, it's $40 a gallon. But it is organic by nature, certainly not by certification. And here's a classic example in which they set the price and the buyers don't. Come on, man. Wild harvesting additionally, and you will see an entire session on this particular crop at noon, a combination presentation from Givaudan and Ecoso. This is a project that operates in Namibia, where people harvest devil's claw, Harpagophytum procumbens, which is very valuable for arthritis, treating inflammation. This is the poorest group of people I've ever seen and worked with in the botanical scene ever. And I want to make it clear, a great many people who harvest or collect the plants on which we make billions of dollars live at or below the poverty line and struggle to feed their families. And if we have a crisis in this industry relative to price, it's that large buying companies continually try to force the price down and keep this down. These people are hungry. I mean, literally hungry. They sleep outside under tarps for a couple of months a year. There are lions, there are elephants, there are deadly snakes, there are scorpions that can hospitalize you. They have to go a couple of miles out into the savannah to dig holes all day in the soil to get devil's claw, these tubers, as you see on the right-hand side. In the Ecoso project, when you dig the devil's claw tubers, there are always two of them connected to a main stalk. They take one, cover it back up so that one remains, and leave a stick there so people know that area has already been harvested. In other places, in Angola, for example, there's just widespread destruction with the devil's claw crop. But here, Ecoso really tries to do a good thing, helping to preserve the amount of devil's claw that remains in the ground and not have it wiped out. It is the most extraordinarily difficult harvesting or acquisition scene I have ever seen. These people are really, really desperately dirt poor. I showed up early in the morning with a box of biscuits, and they looked at me like I was Santa Claus. They couldn't believe it. The biscuits were gone in a second. It made me cry. I'd like to talk now a little bit about, well, going along with sustainability. As you may know, psychedelics have become a very, very big thing over the past 20 years or so. Not that people weren't utilizing psychedelics before. Ayahuasca, which has always been a ceremonial psychedelic preparation in the Amazon, has become very popular. Many, many thousands of people go to the Amazon to drink ayahuasca, which is quite an intense experience. I've done it about 135 times or so with 65 different shamans. And so there was a lot of question. Is this sustainable? Is it the case that the vine that is used can be sustainably harvested, or are we wiping this out? A lot of people claim they were wiping this out. This is the only combinatory psychedelic in the world, by the way. It takes a vine and a leaf to make. And so, oh my God, I'm like totally running out of time here. So I spent 2 years with my Peruvian team investigating this, and basically discovered that right now the supply is fine. There are places where there are huge quantities of vine, but if the popularity of ayahuasca continues at the pace that it has, that will no longer be so. From a wages standpoint, in the case of the KSM 66 ashwagandha, we see about a 10 to 15% average better wage than any other activity that the women who do the harvesting can get in other sectors. And this is only part of what gets done, but this helps them to better feed their families. And there's a real effort on the part of the company to provide employment for women. In the case of Maca, large acquiring companies really drove the price down for years and years and years. And then there was a crisis in the Andes that changed all that. And now the maca growers get a fair price. They get paid much more than they ever did. And so they're better able to feed their families, provide necessary equipment for schools, provide medical care, etc. In Vanuatu, South Pacific, we saw this same downward pressure pounding down the price. You know, we got to drive it down on this crop that takes 5 years to grow and is enormously difficult. And again, that has changed. So when I first started working with kava, people were getting about $4 to $6 a kilo. Now the growers are getting about $20 a kilo. They have better food, they have better clothing, they have better schools, they have medicine, they have outboard motors for their boats. It has revolutionized their lives. In the case of the Devil's Claw, the Ecoso project, Giro, who runs that project, eliminated the middle people. Taught the people in the village how to do all of the record keeping, all of the traceability. So now they make that money, and they make more than in any other Devil's Claw harvesting scheme. From a benefit sharing standpoint, which is one of the key, benefit sharing basically means if you're doing well with a botanical, if I buy Maca and I'm making millions of dollars, put some of that back. Share it with the people who do the agonizingly back-breaking labor so that we can make billions of dollars. This cannot continue to be a poverty wage industry, or we will lose the industry entirely. Benefit sharing in the case of KSM 66 ashwagandha means funding a school, funding women's empowerment programs, in this case, building and funding a free hospital. When I was there 4 weeks ago, they just finished vaccinating 20,000 people for free. They provide medical services free, about 80 patients a day, 365 days a year. This is giving back to the community, and this isn't welfare. This is sharing. This is saying, we do well, you should do well too. In Congo, where I went to Compagnie Sucrière, which is the largest and actually the only sugar manufacturer in Congo, on the left-hand side, those buildings are a free hospital. They get about 3,000 people working on their sugar crop every year. They provide free hospital services, free schooling. The wages are not so great. Sugar is not the single most environmentally sustainable product on earth, but the provision of medicine and education has been a huge thing for the communities there. With Maca, we ran a free dental boat in the Amazon rainforest on the rivers for villages along the rivers for 7 years. We got equipment and funding from Colgate. We had some funding from NatureX. And we went around to dozens and dozens of villages with dentists on board and provided free dentistry. Most of the people in most of the villages had never had any dentistry at all. We taught them dental care to the best extent that we could. And this has made a difference, especially in the dental health of children. Tamanu oil, probably the single most beneficial skin healing substance of any kind known in the world, perhaps outside of water. We did something for years when we were supplying this to the cosmetic industry, my friends and I. We added a 7% Convention on Biological Diversity surcharge right on the invoice. You're going to pay this much extra every single time. And then we put that into schools, a maternity clinic, many other things for communities. This is just part of sharing success. Now just to quickly, I got like a minute and a half, but I'm going to do this anyway. I think we can get through this. The last part I want to talk about is honoring cultures. Those companies who develop real relations with the people who supply the botanicals are going to be the survivors. Those companies who are picking up the phone and calling somebody and ordering stuff are going to go out of business. It's just a fact. You know, in the case of Morocco, which is an Islamic nation, anytime you go to see somebody, they say, oh, we'll go to my plantation or we'll go to my factory, but first, just a small tea. There is no such thing as a small tea. You'll be fed cake and bread and fruits and dried fruits and nuts and honey and tea, and it doesn't end until they say it does. And the guy who is right behind the hand of the man who's pouring the tea, who's a buyer for NatureX, now Givaudan, is really one of the main reasons that the relationship works. He's Muslim, he's there with them all the time, he understands their needs, he understands their culture. We have to bridge the worlds with the people who do the work on our behalf. In Vanuatu, South Pacific, my friends and I firewalked every year for 6 years. Yeah, firewalking is terrifying. Yes, it's really, really insanely hot. Yes, people do get burned. Yes, we've had to hospitalize some people. Firewalking as a tradition from Polynesia went to Melanesia, which didn't have that tradition, but firewalking actually has its roots in the utilization of kava. So the people there readily took it up. So we did this as part of showing respect for that culture and for that plant and for that tradition. And the indigenous people of Vanuatu, who'd never firewalked before, fell in lock, stock, and barrel. They loved it. In the Amazon, I've been in many ayahuasca ceremonies, and this again is a way of honoring the shamans. The shamans are the primary healers and herbalists. They're the people who really keep villages healthy. One more, okay. And lastly, we also have contributed to and helped to fund Maca celebrations in the Peruvian Andes. All of these different activities are things that I described to you just to give you a sense of what's possible and some of the variety. I spend a lot of my time providing market access for projects that can't afford to let the market know about themselves. These are some of the media that I've taken stories of botanicals and people from faraway places to. I was on Fox News in 100 countries for 9 years. I've done about 500 TV shows and a couple thousand radio shows and lots of seminars, all to promote the people and the plants. This Maca TV show wound up in 100 countries. ABC Nightline came to Malaysia with me for Tonkat Ali, a forest product. Done a lot through American Botanical Council to help the herbal industry know about this. Look, folks, we're all one humanity. We're all one planet. The planet is in peril. Climate change is real. Poverty is real. We have the opportunity to change all this, and I thank you very much for your time. If you want any more information from me, I'll be over at the KSM 66 booth. Thank you so much.